So all the 4 meetings will be recorded for your information. So yeah, over 4 Wednesdays, starting from today, we're going to go over this precious text by Nagarjuna. Yeah, a praise to the Buddha, basically, same as last year. Quite a few of you might be attending the course we did over about 8 Wednesdays, I think, of Lama Tsongkhapa's in praise of dependent origination. Yeah, so it's a similar text. It's much briefer, you know, it's only 26 verses or so. But yeah, this is a similar essence and very inspiring. His Holiness Dalai Lama has taught this text on quite a few occasions, so fortunate to receive. And yeah, it's a very profound text on emptiness and dependent origination. So before we start with the extra prayers, try to generate the correct motivation why we study dependent origination and emptiness. And that's, well, if you think about the praise Lama Tsongkhapa made, is kind of seeing that without these teachings, there's no way to eliminate ignorance. And seeing that without these teachings, there's no way we can liberate the ignorance of others. You know, so that's why Lama Tsongkhapa praised the Buddha, you know, because of these teachings on emptiness. Yeah, so it's very moving. After Lama Tsongkhapa, as we saw last year, realized emptiness, he saw that the Buddha was a real kind of object of refuge. So object of refuge from the point of view of eliminating ignorance to achieve the state of nirvana, right? The refuge of the middle scope, as well as the Buddha being a superior object of refuge for the great scope, out of the fear of the suffering of samsara, and seeing that by eliminating ignorance and progressing on the path with bodhicitta, one can achieve the state of enlightenment, right? So yeah, so that's why Lama Tsongkhapa praises the Buddha for that particular purpose, the teachings on emptiness. Yeah, so yeah, so according to the middling and the great scope, we try to generate a motivation for today's coming up yeah, Wednesday. So try to generate motivation that we're here, you know, not only to eliminate ignorance for oneself to achieve liberation, but even more try to think about progressing on a spiritual path to enlightenment, and why, in order to eliminate the suffering of countless mother sentient beings. We have incredible kind of undergoing suffering, and not just suffering every moment. And certain sentient beings have an uncommon karmic connection with us, so they're waiting for us to achieve a state of enlightenment, so to say. So there's a kind of responsibility we have there to progress as quickly as possible and put effort. And so yeah, for that purpose we're here, so try to generate a motivation for yourself. And then, yeah, we can do the prayers together. So while doing the prayers, think in front of yourself is Sakyamuni Buddha, surrounded by the 70 pandits of Nalanda, in particular by this text in relation with Nagarjuna. So Nagarjuna and his direct disciples, like Arya Deva, for example. And then, yeah, and you can also think around the Buddha, not only 70 pandits, also the 84 Mahasiddhas of India, the masters of Tibet, and the masters of the different other traditions, not only Sanskrit, but also the Pali tradition. And surrounding yourself all countless sentient beings and focusing on their suffering, think without leading them in a prayer, without understanding emptiness, I will not be able to help them. Yeah, so that's why I'm going to lead them in a prayer. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhats, perfect complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sagata of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the Bhagavan, the glorious conqueror Sakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, go for refuge. To the Guru, the teacher, the Bhagavan, the Tathagata, Arhats, perfect complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sagata of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you, the Bhagavan, the glorious Sakyamuni, prostrate, make offerings, go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhats, perfect complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and a good conduct, Sagatan over the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the Bhagavan, the glorious Sakyamuni, I prostrate and go for refuge. When supreme amongst humans, you were born in this earth, you played out the seventh stride and then said, I am supreme in this world. To you, O wise and I prostrate. With pure bodies formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Flame that blazes in the three worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With supreme science, faced like a spotless moon, godlike gold, to you I prostrate. Thus three, like you, the three worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I prostrate. Savior having great compassion, the teacher having all understanding, the field of merit, that God is like a vast ocean, to you the one come to dustness I prostrate. The purity that frees from attachments, the virtue that frees from the lower realms, the one part sublime pure reality, the Dharma that pacifies I prostrate. To those who are liberated and show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you the sublime community intending virtue I prostrate. Do not commit any unwholesome actions, engage in perfect wholesome actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly, this is the teaching of Buddha. A star, a defective dew, a lamp, an illusion, drop or a dew or a bubble, a dream, a lightning, cloud, seek on these things as such. To these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the full faults, and be delivered from samsara ocean, perturbed by the weight of aging, sickness, and death. I prostrate to the three noble and rare sublime ones. Thus did I heard at one time the Bhagavan was dwelling on a vast virtuous mountain in Rajgir together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration categories of phenomena called found perfection. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Abhilasvara looked upon the very practice of the found perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty in their nature. Then, to the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Abhilasvara, how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice activities of the found perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Abhilasvara said that to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice activities in the found perfection of wisdom, should look upon it like this, correctly and repeating, beholding those five aggregates also as empty in nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Empty is not other than form, and form is also not than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristics, unproduced, unsealed, stainless, not without stain, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visible form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no objective touch, no phenomenon. There is no element, and up to including no mind element and no mental conscious element. There is no ignorance and no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to including no aging and death, and no extinction, aging, and death. Similar, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and part. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, the bodhisattvas who rely and dwell in perfection of wisdom. The mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifest complete awakening, the unsurpassed, perfect, complete light, in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that specifies all suffering should be known as a truth, since it's not false. The mantra of perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata, Gadagata, Bharagata, Bharasamkata, Bodhisattva. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the found perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan raised from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva. Well said, son of the lineages is like that. One should practice profound perfection, wisdom, just as it, and even Tathagatas, spiritual wisdom. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Abhilasvara, and those surrounding there entirely, along with the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharva, are overjoyed and highly praised by the Bhagavan. Lion face, yeah, a bit down. The prayer, a bit down. Yeah. From the holy supreme realm of Gajara, you who possess the power of clairvoyance and magical emanations, look as a practitioner like a mother for a child. The host of the Dakinis of the tree abode, I prostrate. Akasamaya Sasana Samaya Be, Akasamaya Sasana Samaya. Akasamara Sasana Samaraya Be, Tayata, Gata Gata, Paragata, Parasam Gata Bodhisattva. By the teachings of the three noble, rare, sublime, possessing the power of truth, may hindrances be averted, and may they be eliminated, and may they be pacified. May all enemies and negative forces opposed to Dharma be completely pacified. Shinto Kuri itself. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified, and may be free from harmful conditions in Dharma, and may excellence be in accordance with the Dharma, and may there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here and right now. The foundation of all good qualities is a kind and perfect pure Guru. Correctly devoting to him is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great efforts, please bless me to rely upon with great respect. Understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once is greatly meaningful and difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate that mind that unceasing day-night takes essence. This life is impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly decays and death comes. After death, just like the shadow follows the body, the result of black and white cannot follow. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be careful, to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds. Seeking samsaric pleasures is a door to all suffering. They are uncertain, cannot be relied upon. Recognize these shortcomings. Please bless me to generate a strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Led by these pure thoughts, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. The root of the teachings is keeping the pratimoksha vows. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. Just as I've fallen into the sea of samsara, so have all modern migratory beings. Please bless me to see this and train in supreme bodhicitta and be the responsibility of free migratory beings. Even if I develop only bodhicitta but do not practice the three types of morality, I will not achieve enlightenment. With my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice the bodhisattva vows with great energy. Once I've pacified distraction to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to generate quickly within my mind stream the unified part of calm abiding and special insight. Having become a pure vessel by training in the general path, please bless me to enter the holy gateway of the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the true attainments is keeping pure vows and samadhi. As I've become firmly convinced of this, please bless me to protect these vows and pledges like my life. Then having realized the importance of the two stages, the essence of the Vajrayana, by practicing with it great energy, never giving up the 4 sessions, please bless me to realize the teachings of the Holy Guru. Like that, may the Gurus show the noble paths and spiritual friends who practice it for long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely all out and in hindrances. In all my lives, may I never be separated from perfect Gurus. May I enjoy the magnificent Dharma by completing the qualities of stages and paths, and may I quickly attain the state of Vajrayana. Sajibege Joje Andrare Rale Nege Bari Zanye Je Ganjo Badu Dani Jasu Dagi Jushe Gebe Sonan Dola Benje Sangye Nova Jo Sangye Chedan Soni Sonan Ganjo Badu Dani Jasu Dagi Jushe Gebe Sonan Dola Penje Sangye Doba Jo Sangye Chedan Sangye Janjo Bada Dani Yasu Dagi Juju Yebe Sona Dola Penje Sangye Doba Jo Dagi Juju Nisu Tao Dagi Kama Juju Kama Tunja Kotam Dela Chas. Yeah, so that praise by Nagarjuna, where it says, moved out of compassion, you will eliminate wrong views, you teacher of the sublime Dharma, to Gautam Buddha, I pay homage. So that's a praise by Nagarjuna, and well, from the Fundamental Wisdom text, chapter 27, if I'm right. And that His Holiness uses always in the beginning of a teaching. And that summarizes also the text of today, basically, because Nagarjuna there, as we just, according to our motivation, we talked about how Lama Tsongkhapa composed the text we did last year by depending on the great scholars of Nalanda, realizing emptiness, then praising the Buddha for his teachings on emptiness. It's quite moving, you know. So, and then Nagarjuna wrote a similar text for a similar purpose, and that's the text we go discuss. And this verse coming out of the 27th chapter of the Fundamental Wisdom, there it says, you moved out of compassion. Yeah, so the Buddha is moved out of compassion, meaning, you know, by the power of his compassion, there's no other things that can be done. And so for us, it's mostly the afflictions. We're overpowered by the afflictions, and that's why we act in different ways. Yeah? But the Buddha acts because of having this incredible strong motivation of bodhicitta, right? So in this verse, it refers to compassion. So compassion is a substantial cause, so to say, of one of the aspirations of bodhicitta, right? As we know, bodhicitta has two aspirations, a resultant one and a causal one. And one of the aspirations is this compassion. And also, as you know, compassion is as the cause. Equanimity, you know, if you study the 7 cause and effect methods to generate bodhicitta, then you know that the basis to prepare the mind training is equanimity towards all sentient beings, right? Enemy, friend, and stranger. Then you go in a different sequence of training the mind, and then you come to loving kindness and compassion, right? So compassion basically is kind of the seed for bodhicitta to arise. And loving kindness is kind of, you know, the conditions, fertilization and moisture, so to say. Why is that so? Because compassion is one of the aspirations of bodhicitta. So you know, bodhicitta has 2 aspirations, a causal one and a resultant one. The causal one means you have this kind of special intention of compassion, that thinks I have to liberate all sentient beings. That's my responsibility, right? So that compassion is one of the last causes of the 7 cause and effect, right? Or the last one, so to say, because then within the special intention, yeah, the taking responsibility, then you focus upon if you are capable of doing so, and if not, what you have to accomplish. And then you come to the resultant aspiration of you have to become a Buddha in order to liberate sentient beings. Because even though we have bodhicitta, our capacity to help is limited. Yeah? So a Buddha's capacity to help sentient beings is beyond limitations. Yeah? Having an all-knowing mind, and that's very needed, you know, because if you study the lamp of the path from Atisha, you know, Lamdun, the Janju Lamdun, the stage of path to enlightenment, of the first text that came in Tibet. I mean, not the, in a structured way, so to say. There also, Atisha says very clearly, without clairvoyance, it's very difficult to benefit sentient beings. You know? So then you need a clairvoyance, not just a limited form of clairvoyance, but a clairvoyance beyond limitations, an omniscient mind of a Buddha. You know? So that's why that's needed. So that's in the one of the aspirations of bodhicitta is a resultant one. I have to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, right? And the Kosa aspiration is why? In order to liberate sentient beings from their suffering. And I'm going to take the responsibility for that. Yeah? So that's the special intention of great compassion, right? Laksam Ninje, we say in Tibetan. So compassion has many levels. We have compassion among the four measurables. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings be free of suffering. May they be free of suffering. Yeah, that's a kind of a compassion that exists even on those who abide in the paths of the Sravaka and Prajeka vehicles. Yeah, the Pratimokshayana, so to say, those who strive for individual liberation. They have this kind of compassion. How wonderful would it be that they're free of suffering? May they be free of suffering. Yeah, but where we're talking about the compassion of the special intention, right? Sixth point in the seven cause and effect method, that just before the effect of bodhicitta is being produced, that special intention of great compassion is called great compassion. Or sometimes we say in Tibetan, kyabdogi ninje. It means kind of a compassion that has a wish to liberate sentient beings. Kyab means refuge. De means to wish. Ninja means compassion. Kyabdogi ninja. So yeah, that's kind of the aspirational cause, substantial cause, so to say, for bodhicitta to arise, right? So yeah, that's good to know, because the Buddha, in this praise, it says, you moved out of compassion. So the Buddha has this kind of incredible compassion, and then cannot do anything else than work for the benefit of sentient beings. So that's quite an inspiring kind of intention. You will eliminate wrong views, meaning the Buddha will eliminate the wrong views of ignorance, right? Because ignorance is not in accordance with reality, and ignorance, what kind of ignorance we're talking about? We have all kinds of ignorance, of course, but yeah, the ignorance we talk about here, those who study a bit more, I can say that or not? Those who study a bit more? Because he advertised it, people with already some knowledge. So that means that the view of the transitory collection, that's the ignorance we're talking about. Yeah, that means an ignorance according to Prasangika view of philosophy. Yeah. So what is that ignorance? That is an ignorance focusing upon the aggregates of body and mind, right? And then perceiving that there is a self that exists inherently. And that's kind of the view of the transitory collection. So that means that we have a body and mind, and based on this body and mind, there appears to be a self existing from its own side, without dependence, right? And so that self that appears without dependence is being considered as a self that has to be abandoned, because that doesn't exist. Because the body and mind are in the nature of interdependence. There's nothing among body and mind that can exist without dependence, right? Yeah, so we go into that later, but just to conclude the introduction of this verse, you move to our compassion, you will eliminate wrong views. Yeah, so eliminating ignorance mainly. Yeah, and you're teacher of the sublime Dharma. So that means the teachings on emptiness and the teachings on dependent origination. Yeah, because those who did last year course, they remember that emptiness and dependent originations are two sides of a coin, right? Emptiness proof interdependence, and interdependence proves emptiness. Emptiness means not nothingness. Emptiness means empty of something, or lack of something. So empty of what? Empty of inherent existence, right? The lack of an inherent existence. That's what we're talking about. So because things don't exist from their own side, there's dependence, right? And because there's dependence, things cannot exist from their own side, right? So that's also true in quantum mechanics, that we know that if you go to the quantum level, then the individual particles, they don't exist by their own side inherently, right? There's a correlation, a relation between the individual particles. Nothing exists all by itself, although it appears like that. If we look at the table appearing to us, or the computer screen, It appears very solid out there, you know, separate from the mind, even completely by itself. But does it exist in that way or not? That's the question. You know, if we analyze even from a conventional level that we're meeting here over Zoom, it depends on many causes and conditions. Yeah, so sometimes Zoom stops all of a sudden, or my computer screen, happened a few times, freezes like that. Or it goes black and I couldn't bring it back anymore. So that's Zoom. You know, depending on Zoom and depending on my computer and the connection, there's so many causes and conditions that makes it happening, right? So there is no from its own side existing computer or screen as such. But it appears like that. If you look at the computer, it appears there out there all by itself, right? That's how it appears. But actually, of course, quantum mechanics is very complex, but even on a conventional level, of course, in effect relationships, you know, we can analyze that's how it appears. Basically, there's not a real nature, you know. It appears very solid all by itself, but yeah. So yeah. So that's so that means that whatever appears is not reality by definition. Yeah? So that's what the Buddha said. What Nagarjuna said. Buddha, you eliminate wrong views. You know, you're teacher of the sublime Dharma. So with proving that the computer depends on cause and condition, so that's why it cannot exist from its own side, right? And because it doesn't exist from its own side, that's why it depends on cause and conditions. So that's two sides of a coin. Yeah, so emptiness proves interdependence, and interdependence proves emptiness. Yeah. So we can't talk about that. Don't worry. You move up. You eliminate wrong views. Teacher of the sublime Dharma. To Gautam Buddha, I pay homage. You see? So Nagarjuna, in that particular chapter of the Kasa, the fundamental wisdom, he praises the Buddha in this way. You know, it's very moving. That's why His Holiness always uses this verse in the beginning of a teaching to praise to the Buddha. And it's probably true if you have, like His Holiness, like Lama Tsongkhapa, like Nagarjuna, if you have an insight into emptiness like them, then probably you're going to see these teachings as incredibly precious, you know, because this is going to lead you out of ignorance. If you really have certain, some kind of understanding of renunciation, or even better, bodhicitta, then you're probably going to praise the Buddha so much because of these teachings, because this is the way out, you know. And that's like it's more precious than wish-fulfilling jewel, right? Or wish-fulfilling jewel comes from the classical text, but you can talk about billions and billions of dollars, you know. Wish-fulfilling jewel, you just make a prayer and it happens. So in modern times, people don't believe that jewel exists, but we can think about billions and billions of dollars, right? So then you can also do whatever you like, more or less, to a certain extent. But yeah. So that's nothing compared to having the insight into emptiness. So that's why certain bodhisattvas who have a great accumulation of merit, when they see emptiness, the first time they realize emptiness, they get so happy, so blissed out, because this is the thing since beginner's lifetime they never found. So if you really understand beginner's lifetime, and then you never found something like that, and then you find it, you can imagine it's quite a shock to the system, you know. That's why His Holiness says in the video, I don't know if you saw, the great 14th Dalai Lama. It's amazing. You know, that His Holiness said, you know, it's like a lightning. So His Holiness talked about like that. Also in few other occasions. So it's not often talks about his experience of emptiness, but yeah. So that means that if you really understand, which for us is very difficult, right? Begin in this lifetime, and you never have seen this reality, and then you see it, you know, it's amazing. Even people who come to London and they never saw the Big Bang before, and then they see it, they say, oh, wow. But that is just like 50, 60 years, they never seen something like that, you know. So, but then if you think you never saw the Big Bang since beginner's lifetime, and you see it for the first time, then it's a bigger wow, right? But yeah, unfortunately, we don't remember all those lifetimes. But if you could, then you can imagine. So then, if you've never seen emptiness, it's even a greater kind of thing to be seen. Yeah, because then you see there's a way out of samsara. So yeah, most of us, we don't really understand the suffering of samsara. So that's why we don't really understand ignorance as well, and that's why these kind of teaching on emptiness is difficult to see the importance of it. Yeah? But as Holiness says quite often, the more you think about emptiness, the more you think liberation is possible, right? That's very, because if you really understand ignorance, then you see that ignorance is a misconception of reality. And if you analyze, then you can also, a little bit of logic, you can see that things cannot exist the way it appears. Yeah, so to realize emptiness is a little bit further away, but at least we start our practice. That's why Aryadeva says in his 400 verses, even though if you have just a mere doubt regarding emptiness, is a sign of great merit. In his 400 verses. So that means that we meeting here today over Zoom, it's kind of, it's over Zoom, it's different than in reality, but to discuss a text like this is kind of impossible. If you think about world evolutions and the Buddhist teachings being so rare, to be born in a period that just 2,500 years passed, another 2,500. So let's say a period of 5,000 years to be born at a time that these teachings are available in world evolutions of billions and billions of years. Then just to be right there from the point of view of precious human rebirth, if you just think about the 18 freedoms and endowments, it's kind of almost impossible, right? And then on top of that, to meet teachings like emptiness, it's kind of, very rare. So that's a sign of having some merit, having some, gain some good imprints of previous lifetimes. Otherwise, it would never happen. Otherwise, people will drop out or fall asleep or walk away. Yeah, happens sometimes. Yeah, so it's good to know that these teachings on emptiness, especially this text from Nagarjuna, of course, comes from the Buddha, right? But for us to read last Sakadawa, just we did for reading. So I was reading you can see the text a little bit. The very text is very inspiring. The words of the Buddha, and in the Perfection of Wisdom sutras, these things come up all the time. But to structure it in a particular way that is actually be almost spoon-fed. That's to the kindness of the Nalanda scholars and people, modern scholars in Tibet, like Lama Tsongkhapa, etc. Without them, it's very difficult. So even without Chandakirti, it's very difficult, probably. So that's to their kindness that we actually spoon-fed, So we sometimes don't realize that really, So that's very precious. Yeah. So the origin of the text, Nagarjuna was one of the great Indian masters, one of the 70 pandits, and His Holiness Dalai Lama often refers to Nagarjuna and on many occasions teaches the works of Nagarjuna. Because after, let's say, about a few hundred years after the Buddha's passing, then the teachings on emptiness were in a degenerated stage. Yeah, in those days, everything was still oral. There was nothing written down like now. We have even, you could hear in the beginning, this meeting is recorded, something like that. So at the Buddha, there was no recording, and there was no Zoom, of course, but no recording. In the monastery, same thing. We were not allowed in the early days when the tape recorder, the tape recorders came. We were not allowed. Most of our teachers, they don't allow to have those things on the table. He said, put them away. You should listen and write things down and debate and analyze. If you don't understand it, discuss and ask. So that's the oral tradition. So about a few hundred years after the Buddha, you can imagine to preserve all these teachings in an oral way. It's not easy, even if you have big communities of monastics who dedicate their life to these kind of teachings. it's not that easy. So that's why Nagarjuna basically revived these teachings of the Prajnaparamita. Yeah, so, and then he wrote six kind of texts, kind of his main masterpiece, the 6 collections of reasoning regarding emptiness. So in those 6 texts, he only talks about reasoning, proving interdependence and proving emptiness. Yeah, and then he wrote one other text. It's not translated yet. The few of the other texts are translated. That's Dolekun Duba is kind of condensing all the sutras that Nagarjuna in this 7th text, so to say, he compiled a text proving that his 6 texts based on reasoning is not his own fabrication. It's all based on the Prajnaparamita. Yeah, so he proves it's not his own work. It comes from the Buddha himself. Yeah, so that's good to know. And then after Nagarjuna, we had great other scholars of Buddha Palita, Bhavavika, Chandrakirti. Yeah, so thanks to those scholars in that particular sequence, we have these teachings available, and yeah, it's mind-boggling. The clarity, basically, is mind-boggling. Yeah. So Nagarjuna, next to these 6 or 7 texts, he also wrote a lot of praises. Yeah, so there's many praises, and His Holiness taught so many of them. Anyway, there's a whole collection of praises from Nagarjuna, praising the different aspects of the Buddhist teaching and explaining. And then, of course, we have, sometimes you think Atisha was the first founder of the Lam Rim, but if you study Nagarjuna's letter for a friend, for example, then the whole Lam Rim structure is also present already at the time of Nagarjuna, right? So, of course, Jogye Atisha made it a very simplified and easy understandable way structure, but at the time of Nagarjuna, already those texts existed, right? So the Lam Rim is not completely new. Yeah, and you can also see, if you study the Great Exposition or the Lam Rim Chemo, right, by Lama Tsongkhapa, that a lot of the quotations actually come from the letter for a friend, or from Ratnavali, right? Another text by Nagarjuna. Yeah, so this Nagarjuna wrote many texts, a very practical text, and a very philosophical text, and very clear, Yeah, so for us ordinary beings, we still have to depend on commentaries, but because it's mostly a verse form, so that it makes it easy to memorize and easy to condense all the meaning, for survival in future generations. Yeah. So there's the history of the text. And I said, His Holiness, I received this text, I think, at least twice, probably at least twice in Bulgaria, what I remember. Yeah. Next to a few other texts. Yeah, so it's a very precious text on interdependence and emptiness. Yeah, so, yeah. So then you have the text, right? They have the text. So you can follow, is that okay? People can follow on the side, or you have to put it on your screen and then everybody disappears. Yeah, so if people have the text, then I will explain according to the text about, let's say, 6 verses we have to cover more or less, depending on time. Yeah. Yeah, so if you don't have the text, don't worry, I just read it and then you can listen and then I explain. Yeah. So the title of the text is Hymn to the Buddha, the World Transcendent. Yeah, so in Tibetan we say Jinla Deba Tuba. So a hymn or praise. Yeah, so it's a praise to the world transcendent. That's the actual title. Yeah, so world transcendent, to transcend the world means to beyond samsara, right? That's one interpretation. But here it goes a bit further, beyond sentient beings. The Buddha is beyond sentient beings. The Buddha is complete enlightened being. Yeah, so we know we have 2 persons, right? So person doesn't mean a human being. We have 2 kinds of persons, Buddhas and sentient beings. So the Buddha is beyond sentient beings. Yeah? And then the first aspect of the text is paying homage. Yeah, so it means that, as you can see, it's a homage to Manjushri. Why homage to Manjushri? Because there's a homage of the translator. That those who translated into Tibetan language, they classified the Tibetan texts in the 3 Pitaka. We know the 3 baskets, right? The basket of the Vinaya, or moral discipline, right? The baskets of the Sutra Pitaka, or the sutras, and the basket of the Abhidhamma, yeah, or knowledge. Yeah, so we have moral discipline, the sutras, and the knowledge Pitakas. And that refers also to the 3 higher trainings. Yeah, so the Vinaya, or moral discipline, yeah, is to the higher training of morality. Then the Sutra Pitaka to the higher training of concentration, and the Abhidhamma Pitaka to the higher training of wisdom. Yeah, so the 3 Pitakas and the 3 higher trainings, yeah, they related to each other. So here is homage to Manjushri. So that refers among the classification of 3 to the Abhidhamma. Yeah, so the wisdom aspect, so to say. Yeah, so it's relates to the higher training of wisdom. Yeah, so in order to understand the higher training of wisdom, you have to train our mind in morality, and then get concentration, and then using that concentration to focus upon emptiness, to realize emptiness, right? The story of the axe cutting the tree of ignorance. The axe has the sharpness of wisdom, right? And the stable hand of concentration. And the person holding the axe is kind of trained in morality. So that's mean the 3 higher trainings are present. Yeah. Yeah, so that's the explanation of the title. Yeah, so yeah, now I've become very traditional. I know people like it in this way. I can be very traditional if you want to. Yeah, you can explain more about the titles, and yeah, but we keep it a bit simple, because some people maybe think it's all too dry when I go to traditional. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, there's a homage to Manjushri. Yeah, so yeah, the Buddha to depend upon in order to develop wisdom. Also, Lama Tsongkhapa had a very uncommon connection with Manjushri. Yeah, and then also it's very interesting to know that knowledge by itself is not enough. These things of knowledge is not enough. So Lama Tsongkhapa saw Manjushri, as you know, from the biographies, and then asked Manjushri when he was in his early 30s, late 20s, before he went to Olga, the retreat, and then asked Manjushri, because he was an incredible scholar. He had thousands of students in Tibet, even in his 20s, early 20s. It was amazing. So because of that, he had so many followers. And then he asked Manjushri, do I have the view of Prasangika, or is the view of emptiness I have according to Svatantrika Madhyamika? And then Manjushri said, neither. So there was a bit of a kind of a discouragement kind of for Lama Tsongkhapa, but yeah. So then he asked, what do I have to do then? Because I studied quite a bit, So he read a lot of texts. And then Manjushri said, you go in retreat, and do accumulation of merit and purify. And see the teacher as one with deity, and make supplications, right? And then the deity mainly, Lama Tsongkhapa, depends on Manjushri. And then you have this view of Manjushri, and then, yeah, anyway. So then eventually, after a huge amount of purification and accumulation of merit, when he was reading the Buddha Palita text, Kelta Pumpo Dagyena, is a similar verse then, because Buddha Palita, I don't know, is translated, but it's a similar verse as the first verse in the 18th chapter of Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom. That's been translated, right? Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom in Ocean of Reasoning, for example. This one book, commentary by Lama Tsongkhapa on Nagarjuna's text, Fundamental Wisdom. So that's kind of a masterpiece. Yeah. So then, yeah, so that means we have to get the knowledge, but also we have to get accumulation of merit and purifying negative deeds in order to eventually realize emptiness, because otherwise it just remains a kind of, intellectual kind of play. Of course, initially we have to understand, and that's why we're here, right? And we put imprints in the mind, and imprints of emptiness is mind-boggling. Sometimes people don't realize just one verse of emptiness. For us, it's just all available. If you study biographies of masters of the past, for example, the always crying Bodhisattva, and then you know that he did so much just for one verse. So we're very fortunate, basically, to not have one, but 26 verses in this text. So very fortunate. Yeah. So that's the introduction and the title and the praise. So then the first verse, it reads, I bow to you, the world transcendent. You are first in the gnosis of absence. For the benefit of the world, you have suffered long with great compassion. Yeah, so that's very similar to the verse we just started with. You moved out of compassion, you eliminate wrong views. You know, you teacher of the sublime Dharma, to Gautam Buddha pay homage. You know, because moved out of compassion, that's he suffered long with great compassion. Same thing. The Buddha had this so strong compassion that he couldn't do anything else than working for the benefit of sentient beings, right? Yeah. And then he had realized emptiness, achieved enlightenment, and then still he was doubting to teach, you know, because it's not an easy teaching. Buddhism is not easy in general. Emptiness is even more complex, you know. But then being requested a few times, the Buddha taught, luckily, you know. Yeah, so that's the last line. You suffered long with compassion for the benefit of the world, yeah, to benefit sentient beings. And then the second, the first verse I already explained a little bit. I bow down to the world transcendent. Yeah, so the Buddha is beyond the level of sentient being. Yeah, is beyond the world, beyond samsara, and beyond nirvana. Yeah? So beyond the two extremes, you can say. So the extreme of samsara and the extreme of nirvana. Yeah, that's two extremes basically. The extreme of always suffering in samsara, or always abide in peace and happiness for oneself in nirvana. So the Buddha is beyond those two extremes. Yeah? So that's another way you can think about, yeah. But sometimes we say worldly and non-worldly refers to, you know, different aspects of the realizations. For example, a direct perception of emptiness is be considered as non-worldly realization, yeah? Because that leads to liberation. Yeah? So that's kind of a non-worldly part or world transcendent. So that's, yeah, different explanations possible to the term to transcend the world, right? You are versed in the gnosis of absence. Yeah, so it means the wisdom, in Tibetan it actually says, kasa. Embe Geshe. So Geshe is exalted wisdom, we translate sometimes. Empa is to be separated with a possessive particle. Does that means you have the exalted wisdom that is separated of inherent existence, right? And so that's how we read that. Because if we have the exalted wisdom of the direct perception of emptiness, right? That is, to that mind, so to say, only emptiness appears, nothing else, in meditative equipoise. And so also when we do our meditations on emptiness, and we think, oh, this is emptiness, then you're not meditating on emptiness. So if you meditate on emptiness, what should arise to your mind is this absence or lack of inherent existence. Yeah, this kind of, that's why some texts say it's like the sky, you know. So that means at first we recognize how the I appears, you know. Yeah, so the view of the transitory collection, how does it appear? This ignorance, how does it appear? There we have to get a very clear picture of. You know, otherwise, we might shoot in the wrong direction, you know, or we might refute the wrong things. And then people say, oh, nothing exists at all. That's nihilism, right? And you fall in the extreme that nothing exists at all. So that has to be prevented. And the other extreme we have to prevent is that eternalism, that we exist all by ourselves. There's two extremes we have to avoid, right? Nihilism and eternalism, yeah, so to say. So the middle way, that's why it's called the teachings of the middle way, is going to neither of those two extremes. And to prove that middle way, we use the teachings of interdependence, dependent origination, right? There's two terms, dependent and origination. And so dependent proves that things cannot exist inherently from their own side, because they are dependent, right? So this first term, dependent, eliminates the wrong view of eternalism, that my body and mind exist from its own side. Yeah? It appears like that, but actually body and mind doesn't exist from its own side because there's dependence, right? We put some food in and something comes out and we can function, and depending on whether conditions we get sick or not. There's a lot of cause and effect going on all the time with our body. Our mind, same thing. We wake up in the morning, had a pleasant dream, we wake up with a pleasant feeling. If we had a bad dream, we wake up with a bad feeling. And then throughout the day, you know, things change. We read something, our mind gets up or down, you know. So it's many factors play a role in our mental engagements, right? So that means that also the mind cannot exist from its own side because it's dependent, right? In the nature of dependence. So this first term, dependence, proves that things cannot exist from their own side. So you cut this extreme of eternalism, right? Yeah. And then origination, dependent origination. So the term origination helps us to see that conventionally we exist. There's no concrete body or inherent existing body or inherent existing mind, but conventionally we're sitting here. Conventionally you on the other side of the screen. And some people, they not only have their own living room, but they have kind of a picture sometimes. I see. Sometimes think, oh wow, they're sitting in a beautiful garden, but then it's just a picture. Yeah, so that's very nice. In Zoom, I can look in the people's living rooms. Some people have a lot of books, some people have tangas, and some people have both. Some people have neither. Not in the corner I'm looking at here. So there's this interdependence, right? So it means conventionally there is something, right? So that prevents the extreme of nihilism. If you think emptiness means nothing exists at all, then you're not on the right track. So that means conventionally things originate. You see that? So dependent origination, those two terms keeps us on the middle path. You know, not thinking that things exist from their own side, and not thinking that nothing exists at all. Right? So that's that proves emptiness in that way. You know? So yeah, the middle path, so to say. So if you have a real understanding of emptiness, then first you have to get a clear recognition of the object of what we call the object of refutation, right? That one has to be refuted. How does it appear to the mind? That's very important. When you study more emptiness, and in particular, Lamm's Cup is very strong on that. If you don't have that object clear, then you have to go back to get it clear. Then you use reasoning. Does it exist with or without, or within the body or separate from the body? We come to that. So without object refutation, it's very difficult to know what we're talking about, right? So, and that needs merit. That you need a lot of merit, and you need to purify. Because most of us, when we try to meditate on emptiness, as soon as you get a little bit of glimpse of how the object of refutation appears, then as soon as you start analyzing, it fades away. So that's a sign of lacking something. So the real meditation on emptiness means that first you get an extreme clear picture of that appearance. How does the I appear inherently? And so when you get angry, just before you're getting angry, there's a concrete concept of I that comes up. At some point he criticizes you. How dare this person say this to me? I'm not like that. They point out your mistakes. So if you have those mistakes or don't have those mistakes, this I comes up, right? So that's very important to recognize. How does it appear? Or strong anger, strong attachment that comes up and says, oh, I need this, or I don't like this. So that's a very concrete I that appears to the mind. So according to Prasangika view, it appears in a way mixed with the aggregates. Many scholars like Jamyang are very clear about this point. It appears to be mixed with the aggregates. It's kind of an innate. The real ignorance has to be abandoned. For those who study a bit more, among the acquired and innate ones, is the innate ignorance, right, which is there since being in this lifetime. So that appears to be mixed with the aggregates sometimes. How dare this person say this to me? There seems to be something there existing from its own side. Or so when people point out your mistakes or give you a hard time scolding you, then you should be very pleased. Not only you can change because they point out your mistakes. If people don't point out your mistakes, you think you're perfect, and then all the faults are with others all the time, and then we never improve, right? So if we always think we are the perfect one on the world, the only one on the whole planet, all people, they have faults. So if you think like that, then you can, soon realize that that's actually not the case, right? So, so that means a person who criticizes you or points out your mistakes is extremely kind, to not only to let yourself to improve, to see your own drawbacks, but also to recognize this I. How does it appear? Because otherwise it's impossible to get a clear picture of, So this person actually is sometimes, you can say, kinder than the Buddha, because the Buddha can explain to you how many ways he likes, but if you don't get object refutation clear, you will never realize emptiness, right? So that's to the kindness of a person who actually criticizes you or points out your mistakes. So that being the case, then we can see as soon as there's a strong I that appears, afflictions arise. How dare this person say this to me? I'm not like this, with capital I and mine. So I and mine. That's the real definition of the review of the transcendental collection, is focusing upon the collection of the aggregates, and there's an I and mine appears to exist inherently. Because we say I as a self, and we say mine in the form of my body, my arm, my leg, my computer, my possessions. So when you have a computer or possessions and it's be stolen, then you say, oh, mine. So there's a very concrete concept of I. And that's in that way we can see not only it arises, the self appears like that, but also all our possessions, they appear very concrete. My this, my that, right? And that's why irritation happens. If you have a new car and then by accident the person just stretches it or something in an accident, some people get really angry then all of a sudden. It can be an accident, but it's my car, So then this I comes up. The car doesn't have feeling, and insurance mostly fixes those problems, But there's before that comes into account. There's this concrete concept of I, my car. Then there you go, problem. Or my time. Some people they find it very difficult if the train is a few minutes late, or the traffic jam. My time, I don't like to waste my time. People say sometimes, or they don't say it, but they think like that. So that means my time, my room, my space. So if you live in a monastic institution and with roommates in rooms like 1/3 of the size of my room where I have now, then it's incredible. In the beginning, it's not easy, I have to admit, but it's a very good teaching. Because, my this, my that. If you have a room and because your bed and is a place to sleep, is a place to study upon, is a place to sit doing prayers, is a place to sit for meals, there's no other space in the room, basically. So, and then a meter from that, there's the other bed of the other person. If you're lucky, sometimes it's almost, heads to heads, basically, of the bed. So it's very interesting, so then you have, I lived with, most of the time, there's one roommates, but in Gyume, we had 10. So then sometimes if you want to put, you want to put something here, but the other person actually wants to put there, you see? It can sometimes become a problem. And so that means, that's all related with I, you see? My room, my space, my this. So that's, you can see it's cause for problems. You see that? Yeah, so you have to get a very clear picture how the I appears in those kind of circumstances. Yeah, and then you have to analyze: does it exist the way it appears? Yeah, yeah. So how does it appear when a person criticizes you or points out your mistakes, or strong afflictions arise: attachment, anger, jealousy, pride. Also with anxiety, fear, same thing. A very strong I appears. So that's, you can see this ignorance is a root of all our problems, basically. That's what the Buddha said, It's the root of samsara. It's the root for the afflictions to arise, And through the power of afflictions, we experience suffering, mental, and then takes the aspect of physical and verbal behaviors. There's a kind of, negative deeds, and then there's a lot of suffering, you know. So that means that this ignorance is really something to think about. And it's not only a Buddhist thing, because a lot of scientific research been done regarding self-centeredness, for example. Very interesting. You know, that actually it proves that people who are more self-centered, there's more issues. Physical health and mental health. Very interesting. Low self-esteem, depression, blood pressure. Very interesting. So the Buddha didn't invent this kind of things, right? The Buddha saw this reality and then experienced it and then taught how actually things exist, right? So it's the law of reality, the law of cause and effect relationships. It's nothing something made by somebody. So if we abide by that law and understand these things, then there's a progress, right? So yeah. So first of all, we have to get a clear recognition of how the I appears. Yeah. So that's the first step of your homework. Before we meet again next Wednesday on Zoom, then I will ask you the question: how many minutes every day did you meditate on how the self arises? Yeah, so that it's not that difficult, you know, just to put on some kind of discipline, especially when you work. Sometimes just to sit back if there's a situation or conversation, see how the I appears sometimes. Yeah, it's very interesting. Or watch the news or things that disturbs the mind and generates emotions. Right? Just check, just without just following the news and read. But you read one thing and then check. Then you learn, you know. Then it's then even the dharma, reading the news becomes kind of dharma. Yeah. Or you know, just being scolded becomes dharma, right? Yeah. So that's because if you just sit in a cave somewhere up in the mountains, if you never recognize these points, then you're wasting your time, right? So we have so many opportunities. Yeah, so many. So yeah, you can. That's very precious. But if you have to face these issues and you put them into practice, it's great benefit. But if you face these issues but you don't put them into practice, that's a waste of time, right? And we don't like to waste time, because we say my time is very precious. You see? So yeah, that's your homework. Yeah. So, and then next to that homework, then we go to verse number 2, where we have to do a little bit more than that, where it says that apart from the mere aggregates, no sentient beings exist. You uphold. Yet, great sage, you continue to remain perfectly immersed in the welfare of beings. So that's a very interesting verse. So that verse summarizes a verse which also His Holiness always recommends, a verse of also fundamental wisdom of Nagarjuna, you know, where it actually asks the person who reads the verse, where is the Buddha? Right? So it refers to the object of refuge. Yeah, we talked about the Buddha being an object of refuge from the point of view of the small scope, from the point of view of the middling scope, point of view of the great scope. Yes, those who study Lamrim. On the small scope, we know that we fear the suffering of the lowest states of existence, and because of that, we want to be liberated from the fears of lowest states of existence, and that's we take refuge, right? So there's a refuge in accordance with the lowest scope of the Lamrim. Yeah. Then we see to have a human body and not falling in the lowest states of existence, but to have a precious human rebirth, so to say, or rebirth as a god, is still suffering because it's still in samsara. So we take refuge in the Buddha because we fear the suffering of samsara, right? So that's taking refuge in accordance with the middling scope. Yeah? And then fearing the suffering of sentient beings and want to liberate them from that suffering is taking refuge going to the great scope. Yeah? So we can take refuge in different ways. So then if you do that, then you take refuge in the Buddha. And when you take refuge in the Buddha, so same thing. Then when you say Sangye Chedam, say the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. So also when you say something like that, actually you should think, where is the Buddha? Right? Or you wake up in the morning and you switch on the light, and then you say, where is the light? And then you search. And you look, check yourself. When you wake up in the morning, then first wash your face, otherwise probably you won't be able to really check in a very sophisticated way, because your mind is still like half asleep, you know, so that's, you have to be ready for that. But at least the habituation builds up. If you habituate yourself well in that regard, then, as his owner says, you know, sometimes owner even dreams he's teaching or contemplating emptiness. It's very moving. So by the power of habituation, it can be possible, you know. So if you contemplate on a regular basis throughout the day emptiness, then for sure one day it will come up in your dreams. And then with the dream consciousness being extremely subtle, that's great, can be great progress. You know? So that's very inspiring. You know? So that's, His Holiness doesn't say that just for it's only meant for those, you know, people who know a little bit more about these things. Otherwise, His Holiness doesn't explain it, but I just mentioned it. You know, very inspiring. Yeah. So the second verse, right, it talks about this is what I was going to explain, another verse by Nagarjuna, where it says, neither the aggregates nor different from the aggregates. The aggregates don't depend upon him, nor does he depend upon them. You know, the Tathagata, or the Buddha, does not possess the aggregates. What is the Tathagata, or where is the Tathagata? So same for yourself. You sit, and you see, where is Transcendent Namdak? You know, is not the aggregates, individual parts, is not individual parts by themselves, neither the collection, neither separate from body and mind, right? And neither is a controller, independent controller over body and mind. So where is Transcendent Namdak? That's a question. So I can read all your names out, but that takes time. So you can say your own name and check, where are you? You know. So for that purpose, if you have a clear picture of the object of refutation, then it becomes a very profound kind of contemplation, right? Because then you have this clear picture of how the I appears, and then you analyze, does it exist the way it appears or not? If it exists the way it appears, I should be able to find it somewhere, right? Yeah. So it's like it appears almost, the I appears almost that you can almost hold it by your hands. That's solid. It appears like that. But if you look for it, we say like a mirage. You know, if you have, like a few days ago, and it was about 30 degrees Celsius. I think, I don't know, you went to the beach? We were not allowed to go, but there were a lot of people there, I saw on the news. But we were not allowed to go. But probably if you drove a car, I think in England, same thing, on the road, you can see, right? The mirage, right? Yeah. So then you know that you see it in a distance, and it seems to be there very solid. You know, we know it's a reflection, so it appears as an illusion, but you know. And then the closer you come, actually, it's not there as it appears. You know, so same with the eye, it looks very solid, but if you look for it, then it actually disappears. You know, same thing. Yeah, it looks like you can almost touch it. Same with a mirage, it almost looks like you can touch it, but the closer you get, actually you see it disappears. Right. So with the eye, same thing. You know, it appears very solid, concrete. This object of refutation. But if you look, where is it? Is it one with body and mind? Or is it different with body and mind? That's the first logic we will see in the Lamrim, yeah? One and different. Whatever exists is either one or different with body and mind, right? So there's no other opportunity, possibility. You know, the cup, this cup, you can see, but show you, yeah, this cup. This cup is different from the computer. It's different from the screen and different from the camera, right? Isn't it? So, but a cup is one with cup, so to say. So everything is either one with cup or different from cup. So everything that exists is either one with cup, the cup itself, or different from cup, anything else in the cup, right? You follow that or not? Yeah, so that means that everything that exists is one or different from cup. And so the same thing, if the I exists the way it appears, it should be one or different from body and mind. There's no other possibility, right? Right? Same logic. So then you check. If it's one with the body, there's many parts. You have legs, you have muscles, you have bones, organs. So it should be many, right? But it appears to be one. So then, in this case, you have to know how does it appear. Yeah? Because how it appears, that's what we refute, right? It appears to be one. It appears to be solid by itself, yeah? Maybe a little bit mixed with the aggregates. It doesn't appear to be many different parts, right? That's not the way it appears. So it's one with the body, it should be many. And it can be many because it appears to be one. So that's the first thing we refute, right? Then we say, oh, maybe it's different from the body. So then think it's inherently separate from the body. So mentally you put your body aside. Does the I still arise? The object of refutation, it doesn't arise because it's my body, right? So it cannot be different. Yeah, inherently different from the body. Same for the mind. The mind has all these individual moments, and the mind gets more subtle and more coarse. So in that, and we have, as we know, most of you know, there's main mind and mental factors, right? 6 types of consciousnesses, 51 mental factors, depends what kind of division you take. Yeah? So within that complexity of this flux of thoughts over time, and more coarse, more subtle, there is so many aspects of the mind. So if it's one with consciousness, also there should be many, because there's many parts of consciousness, right? So then we see, oh, the I appears one, so it can be many. So then we see it's not one with consciousness, right? Then we say, oh, it's separate from consciousness. Yeah, then still that doesn't really appear like that, because my mind, my feeling, So at that time, meditator with a lot of merit and has a clear picture of the object of refutation. When object of refutation is clear, appears, right? Somebody criticizes you, you remember that. How does it appear? Then you say, okay, if it exists the way it appears, it should be one or different from body and mind, right? First we say, without losing how the I appears. Yeah, so we can, Pabonke Rinpoche says, you can talk with a person and watch the mountain track at the same time, right? So we can do those things with the mind. So in a similar way, one corner of the mind, you keep this clear appearance of how the I appears, right? And with the other corner of the mind, you analyze if it's one or different from body and mind, right? Yeah, or we don't walk in the city with an iPhone or with a smartphone, a map, I was explained. Once I went, now I start walking more, I tell you all the time, but last year I went only two times to the city for a touristy track. Once Radek, he took me, because I was just new in London, so he took me out, very nice. And then my mother came, and then also went on a tourist track to Buckingham Palace even. And there I saw a man walking not with two mobiles. I couldn't believe. And he was looking at both of them, so as well as on the road. So it's possible, yeah? So here, same thing. How does the I appears? We hold with the mind, and then we analyze. If it's one or different corner of the mind, yeah? So you can imagine if you have a very clear appearance of how the I appears, and you have a very sharp reasoning, it should be one or different. It's not one, it's not different. At that time, it should just fall away. That appearance of the I should just fall away. In the sense, Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, right there, which is a very good comment. You never find it in the text. Right there, meaning how it appears, that all of a sudden doesn't exist anymore. Right there. That's a very interesting comment, because at that time, only the absence or the lack of this inherent I that appeared before, only the lack or the absence of that I comes to mind. And that's emptiness. So then, if you hold that with your mind, that lack, then you meditate on emptiness, right? So that's, in relation with verse number 4. Yeah. Oh, sorry, verse number 2. Yeah. sometimes, yeah, my mind is a bit kind of complex, so that's why I say things different than I think sometimes, or the other way around. Yeah. So sorry for that. Yeah. Yeah, so that's verse number 2. And then verse number 3, it says, wise one. Yeah, so that verse number 2 is very profound, because that summarizes the whole one and different reasoning we can find back in the Lamrim, right? Yeah, about how to meditate on emptiness. So there's many reasons, but many great meditators, they praise this reason of one and different, because it's very powerful, you know. So they find it very helpful. That's what they say. You know? So, yeah. So then verse number 3, because I was planning to do 6 verses, but we're already on time. It's going over. Yeah. See, I made notes also today. So I was planning to be all the way up till verse number 6. See there. But yeah, probably not. But let's try 3, and so we do one more. Yeah, it's the first day, so we do it. Yeah, we have enough time. So wise one, it says, verse number 3. You have declared to the intelligent ones that the aggregates too are comparable to an illusion, like a mirage. Yeah, we just talked about, like a city of Gandharvas or a dream. So that means that in this meditation on emptiness, you know, if you meditate correctly, then it's like the sky, they say. You know, why like the sky? Because the sky is also an absence, right? So with this meditation on emptiness, it's not the absence of nothingness, but the absence of this inherent appearance of the self, right? So that you see, it doesn't exist the way it appears. It's like the sky, empty, nothing, right? So Lama Zopa Rinpoche sometimes it looks, Prasangika view, it looks like it's almost nothing, kasa, nihilism, or nothing at all kind of thing. Yeah, because it's when you meditate on emptiness, then there's only a lack of inherent existence, right? So then only that lack of inherent existence appears to the mind, right? It's like a vacuum or an absence of inherent existence. So that's like the sky. Then when you come out of that meditation and you look around, then things appear straight away, because if your meditation, the real meditation emptiness, only the lack appears, right? It's just a vacuum or just emptiness, right? When you come out of the meditation, then as Honi describes in this book, The Art of Forgiveness, very interesting, that things appear. Because things appear concrete out there, but you straight away see it's an illusion. Yeah, it's kind of like an illusion. You don't believe it anymore. And if you come out of that meditation on emptiness and you think, oh, it's just cause and effect relationships, nothing else. It can be quite freaking, or a kind of oops kind of experience. So if the oops experience is in the context of it's just cause and effect relationships, nothing else, right? Then you have a good understanding. If you come out of the meditation and think, oh, nothing exists, doesn't matter anymore, whatever you do, then you're completely off track, right? Yeah. So that's what it says here, you know. Things appear like an illusion, you know, like an illusion also, yeah. We talked about it last year quite a bit when we went over Lama Tsongkhapa's in praise of deep ordination. There's different kind of examples being used in the Prajnaparamita text and in King of Concentration Sutras. Yeah, so like things like a tree, the banana tree. Banana tree doesn't have a real trunk, right? It's kind of, sometimes they say like an illusion. Or like water bubbles. We just read in the last verse of the Praise to the Buddha, and there's one verse from the Diamond Cutter Sutra actually, that also summarizes a few of these examples, or like an illusion, just, or like lightning, or like a moon in water, or like a mirage, as we just said, you know. It looks very concrete out there, but the closer you get, actually disappears. It doesn't exist in that way. You know? So that's, yeah. That's those examples helps us to relate to things. So if you think in daily life and see how things appear, and actually realize things don't exist at concrete by analyzing, it's just in the nature of cause and effect relationships, then you can a little bit imagine how it will look like if you have a realization of emptiness, how things appear to the mind, right? In post-meditative session, when you come out of the meditation and look around you. For us, mostly, I mean, for myself, not having even the smallest understanding of emptiness, then the meditation is first of all not there. So then illusion is even more difficult to understand. But yeah, you can imagine if you really have a good meditation on emptiness, and then you come out of that meditation, and then you look, and then things appear like an illusion, right? You can probably relate to that. Yeah. Yeah, so then I do verse number 4, and then so those who originates from a cause, without that cause, they do not exist, right? So that refers to the two extremes we just talked about, right? That the cause and effects, right? The seed and the sprout, yeah, they related with each other, and those two are related with the right causes and conditions. Yeah, the seed is the cause, and the corporate conditions of heat, moisture, fertilization, growth in the sprout, right? So that means that the seed doesn't exist all by itself, otherwise it will never grow into a sprout, right? Yeah. And the sprout also needs to depend upon the cause, otherwise the sprout will not come into being. So also the sprout doesn't exist from its own side, right? Yeah. So why would you not uphold that clearly they are just like reflections? Yeah? So that means that it's kind of a cause and effect relationship, but the sprout and the seed, they don't exist from their own side, right? It's just a continuity of a particular matter that grows from a seed into a sprout. Yeah, it's not two separate things in time, right? You see that? Yeah. So that's verse number 4. Yeah, that's maybe I didn't do exactly according to plan, but I just want to stick with time a little bit. I just read from Tibetan because my blah blah is just blah blah, and I received from His Holiness 2 occasions. So then, yeah, some blessing in the words, because all the way His Holiness received it. I think His Holiness received this text. I'm not sure, but probably from Kunala Rimshi, I think. Well, many Nagarjuna texts His Holiness received, or maybe even from the previous Gamachir Rimshi, Renfrew Rimshi. I'm not sure, because Renfrew Rimshi also had a lot of transmissions of the praises of Nagarjuna. So I'm not sure. Either of those two, yeah. But so yeah. So reading Tibetan. Jidanle deba shu so sa kyagadu loga tigata tabam bugadu jidanle deba deba jamba chunugi wala chasel ambe ye jeri ba jidan de ye chasel gande gange do la pembe je yin tu je ma gyu na pombo samde doa yi semje neba kyeshela semjen den la han so je jowa tu ba chenbo gyu ni shu lo den gyu gi pun den la gyu ma mi gyu tisa yi zhong ger milam ji shen de lo den nang gi rab de ten. That's verse number 3 and 4. Kanda gyule jungwa na deme pani yömenbe sunye nidan zumba ro ganza zawa jije jimi de. So that's including number 4. So we're on schedule. Yeah, the text I have is a copy, the photo I took in Sarah, because I thought maybe sometimes it's difficult to carry many texts, but it's a bit unclear. Anyway, yeah, so that concludes the first 4 verses, so very precious. And then we just continue next Wednesday with the remaining verses for another 3 times we meet. Yeah, it's easy to finish because only 26 verses in total, as I said before. Yeah. Yeah. All right, so if there's any questions, then we still have a few minutes.
Thank you, Geshe. If any, somebody has a question, this is Lucia, I'm going to unmute you, Lucia, then you can ask your question.
Yeah.
Okay, so just two things. First thing, before you were talking about the shoot and the sprout, you were talking about the simultaneity of cause and effect.
Yes.
Okay, and then the second thing, you were talking about I, meditating on I, you know, as that solid thing. So even though one can understand that I, as a solid thing, does not exist, but through Mara and outside forces, our obscurations and stuff like that,
exist.
that understanding is constantly being challenged.
Allez. Is
Do you
it?
see what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I mean, our mind and the afflictions, they exist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that means mind exists, karma exists, afflictions exist.
Right.
But mind, karma, and afflictions, they don't exist from their own side, right?
Right.
So because of the nature of interdependence, that's why anger produces suffering, right? If anger exists from its own side, it will never be able to produce something.
Sure.
That's what we're talking about here. So in a similar way as the seed produces the sprout by depending on many causes and conditions, same with our mind. We cannot find from its own side existing mind as such, a solid one, so to say, right? A concrete, inherent existing I or inherent existing mind we cannot find, right? So it's just a flux of different moments that is this continuity, which we describe as, oh, this is the continuity of consciousness, right? And within that continuity of consciousness, there are the afflictions that come and go. Come up by certain causes and conditions, abide for some time, we do an act, and then it ceases. And this ceasing of that act also leaves potentials in the future to ripen. So it's a constant kind of process of cause and effect relationships. And in that constant flux of cause and effect relationships, there is no space, no place for something to exist all by itself, right? So that's what we're talking about here. That with dependent, we see this dependent aspect of the mind and its afflictions that proves that nothing can exist from its own side, right? So we refute this eternalism, that things only exist from their own side, has been refuted. But it proves also that conventionally, things exist. Conventionally, there's a feeling. Conventionally, there's a reaction. Conventionally, you know, we experience emotions. Yeah, so that's the origination aspect, dependent origination. Yeah, so that conventionally the mind exists. Yeah.
My point is more, you know, so through meditation, you understand that point. And now you're happy, and you're walking around and, oh, you know, but then something comes to, you know, shake that realization.
Yeah.
You just keep going?
You just keep going. Because if you have the real realization, it not only makes you just happy, you probably will be blissed out. And then that realization will never be, there's nothing that can break down this realization. Why? Because we go from a wrong view to 3 levels of doubt, to correct assumption, to realization, right? It's different steps. It's not something that comes from 4 Wednesday evening course, you know, it's not the way to understand emptiness just like that.
Right.
It's one of the tools. So that means if you have correct reasoning, understanding reality, that reality, when it's understood well, it will never be shaken. For example, the train example I always go back forward to, that's very easy to relate to. You're in the train, you think you're moving because of the movement on your eye consciousness is being perceived, right? So you think you're moving, but then you look at a platform and you straight away realize, by having seen the platform, you straight away reason it's not our train that's moving because the platform is here, it's the other train that's moving, right? So then when your friend next to you, half dizzy, says to you, oh, we're moving, right? You don't believe it anymore because you saw reality. You see? So we say in classical terms, if you have a realization of emptiness, right, it's incontrovertible knower. That means it cannot be is kind of incontrovertible with regard to reality. You cannot fall back anymore if you saw this reality. So to come to that step will take some time. And in that process, of course, like we're discussing now, there's possibility when it's still in the level of doubt, maybe this, maybe that, we can still fall back, right? We think, oh, probably not true, we exist from our own side. You can believe that again in the future. Yeah, that's a level of doubt. When that gets eliminated, then we go to what we call correct assumption. Those who study mind and awarenesses, they know those terms, right? So then, otherwise it's just a little bit information on the side. So then with correct assumption, the mind is already single pointed to its reality, but not a realization yet. You can still fall back, right? So then more reasoning, more meditation comes, and then one day you realize it, and then we generate what is called inference, right? And one aspect of the definition of inference, which is a valid cognizer, is incontrovertible, right? So that means you don't fall back anymore. So that's something very, very good. Yeah, yeah. One day we come there, one day. Yeah, we put imprints now. The imprints are the seeds are planted, and then one day we get it. The more seeds we plant, the quicker we get there. Yeah, that's how it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, guys? I don't see any blue hands up. Does anyone have a question? Any blue hands?
No blue hands.
No blue hands. Oh, you've given people a lot to think about, Geshe.
Yeah. People maybe walk today, so I don't know. 8:30. But yeah, then do your homework, I would say, meaning that just check, emptiness is not that difficult. People, the meditators and the text, they say emptiness is not as difficult as generating bodhicitta. To understand bodhicitta is easier, but to realize bodhicitta, you need a lot of habituation over a long period of time with concentration, right? Realizing emptiness with the right amount of merit and purification and recognize object refutation is just a matter of logic. That's it. You get it. So it's probably not that difficult. I mean, not that difficult in the sense, don't expect within a few years, right? As Holiness says, for the last 6 decades, I'm investigating emptiness. Also in that movie, I think, when he was in his 16, 17 years old, he started to generate interest in these matters, and now he's 85 almost, right? So that means that, for many decades, His Holiness studying, contemplating, analyzing again and again on a daily basis. And now His Holiness says, of course, a humble kind of comment, I slowly start to understand it. So we shouldn't have too many expectations, but we should also not give up hope, because this is our only hope. And even though if you don't understand emptiness yet, if it's still in the level of the doubting aspect, the self exists, or maybe it doesn't exist. Probably it doesn't exist the way it appears, but I'm not sure. That doubt, Arya Deva said, shakes samsara. So that's you need a lot of merit to come to that doubt. So that's quite fortunate to be there, to hear that. And even if you don't understand it now, there's a story of Manjusri, Shariputra. Manjusri was teaching the teachings on emptiness, extremely profound, the most profound view of emptiness to a huge amount of disciples. And Shariputra, or Madhyana, one of the two, to the clairvoyance, they saw they're going to the lower realms because they're going to generate, nihilistic views. And then Manjusri said, don't worry, only one lifetime, but later on the imprints are planted. Later on, they come back and they realize emptiness. So if you think in those kind of time frames, then we're very fortunate. Yeah. One more white hand.
Yeah, Geshe, we have Laura. Laura, I'll come to you in a second, and then we've got another one that was in the text.
Okay.
From somebody who says, I feel that I have arrived at a correct conceptual understanding of emptiness. Am I right, or just fooling myself?
Have you checked? So that means that if you get a real feel of emptiness, I mean, It's not a feeling, first of all, right? So the lack of inherent existence should arise, right? Then when you get out of, you stop that meditation, then things should see different, like an illusion. But your conviction or your understanding and your faith in law of cause and effect and karma, if that increases, then you're on the right track. If you think, nothing exists, and then you're not really on track, then you study more and see how the object of refutation appears, and then go start over again. Yeah.
Okay, one more from Laura. There you go, Laura.
Thank you. Okay, my question is this. So say that you conceptually understand that there is no I, there is no inherently existing I. So this is a mirage. And if there is no inherently existing I, there is no inherently existing other as well. So no I, no other.
Yeah.
How on earth?
Inherently existing I and other, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But like, how do you get to bodhicitta from there? Because if I don't inherently exist, then others don't inherently exist. How can I develop the wish to liberate others?
Because you don't exist inherently, and others don't exist inherently, right? If others exist inherently, they won't have to suffer. If you inherently have happiness, you will never be sad. If you inherently have anger, you will always be angry. Right? And that's not the case, isn't it? So those sentient beings, as long as they have ignorance, it's just a matter of fact of the right cause and conditions to come about, they're suffering, right? You see,
but what sentient beings?
The sentient beings who exist conventionally in the nature of interdependence. If you poke your head against the wall, you feel, right?
Yeah.
So all the sentient beings around you, when they put the head against the wall, they will feel also, right? So all sentient beings, they exist, conventionally exist, right? But they don't. They appear very solid out there as individuals, and I that almost appears very solid. So we have to see what does exist and what does not exist. But to focus on sentient beings is more difficult. So first we have to focus upon ourselves. If you understand the self of a person within your own continuum, right, then later on it's easier to relate it to other sentient beings.
Okay.
But you have to make clear that, when there's a person coming to you, one of your dearest friends or one of your worst enemies, right? When they come up, you see them as very solid. Person, that person, right? So that solidness actually doesn't exist. The person exists, right? Same as we have this mental image of the person we don't like. It's very concrete, but it's just a mental image. But we believe that mental image is the person. That's the problem. So we get angry at a mental image when the person is not on our side. We think about that person, right? We overestimate the faults of that person. So we build up this mental image in our conceptual consciousness. And we say, oh, this person is bad because of this. And then we get angry. But actually what we get angry at is not the person. It's just a mental image. And we believe that mental image is the person. You see? So that's also a kind of a confusion in our mind there already. Right? But the person exists. This mental image exists. But it's not as concrete as it appears.
The person exists?
Yeah. The person exists. The mental image of the person exists, but it doesn't exist that concrete as it appears. This person is bad because of this. And we have this concrete kind of, from its own side existing person we dislike, right? So that aspect of it from its own side existing dislike, does that exist or not? That's the question. See that a little bit?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Homework.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I will do. Yeah.
Cesar?
I think that's it. I think that's everyone.
All right. Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much. I mean, it's a hardcore business, emptiness, but eventually we'll come there. I remember my first teaching on emptiness from His Holiness in Vajrayogini in France, 1993. I also was sitting there, and Thupten Jinpa being an incredible translator in English, but it didn't make sense at all to me. So I just unplugged the earphone and then just listened to His Holiness in Tibetan. At that time also I didn't know Tibetan, so for me it was the same at that time. But imprints were planted. But yeah, just think that after time it will come. But we need, there's a kind of, you know, if you have a, how do you say, a fruit and you peel it in different levels, one day you will reach the middle of it, right? So each level has a kind of a new understanding. Yeah, emptiness, we study for 4 years in the monastery. You know? 6 days a week. So, and that is still not enough, of course. Then you have to contemplate, read again, you forget, you have to read again and forget. And it's a very slow process, you know, so don't have too many expectations, you know, don't get discouraged, because it's eventually we will understand. So the seeds are planted, the more seeds we have planted, then it becomes easier, right? And that's a hardship in the Dharma. You know, we say you can practice patience from point of view of suffering, right? From the point of view of physical suffering, from the point of view of hardships, particularly with the Dharma. It's a kind of purification. Not wanting to understand, but not able to be able to understand it is a kind of a hardship, right? So that purifies incredible amounts of negative karma, especially with regard to emptiness. So very fortunate, you know? Yeah, so thank you very much for attention, because yeah, you don't realize how fortunate you are to talk about these things, and you know, it's kind of, if Aryadeva said one doubt shakes samsara, then to talk about this for 4 Tuesdays by itself is mind-boggling. Really, you really contemplate well, then it's almost impossible to be able to, because most people find it very difficult, so they run away or whatsoever, and most people don't even have a connection to be present, you know. So very fortunate. So thank you very much. It's a sign of good merit. And then yeah, we continue next Tuesday with a fresh mind, and try to read a little bit this or the commentaries, the Lamrim sections on special insights, you know, with condensed Lamrims, more extensive Lamrims. Yeah, and then just contemplate and do homework, you know. That's the real thing. Just then one day the understanding becomes better and better, like His Holiness says, no? Just like matter of time. Yeah, so thank you very much. So we dedicate for the purpose that oneself and all sentient beings may quickly get understanding of the view of emptiness, yeah, and may the understanding improve more and more and get realizations. Yeah. Toni tawa dimboche magye panange gyuji yeba nyamba meba yang gone gonde bewa sho. And for that to happen without the motivation of bodhicitta, it will never lead to enlightenment. So that oneself, all sentient beings, generate bodhicitta. Janjo semjo rinpoche magye panange gyuji yeba nyamba meba yang gone gonde bewa sho. And for the teachings to spread in all directions, because without the teachings it's very difficult to get understanding. And of course, for the teachers to have a long and healthy life and all the holy wishes to be spontaneously fulfilled, like His Holiness Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and all the teachers you have a connection with, yeah. Gare rawe korwe senganso pendan dewa male jongwe ne chenre sekon tensen gaso jabe chi de padu tengyo chi. And then in this and all future lifetimes, and never be parted from the precious teachers, and then quickly move on the progress and stage path of enlightenment until the state of Vajradhara has been achieved. Gyawa gunda yanda lama dan dame chidan pela longi saran lamgi yunda rabzani doje changi kobanyo to shang. Okay, thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, Geshe.
Sweet dreams. Try to dream about emptiness if possible. Yeah.